I remember hearing Seinfeld on the podcast saying, I treat myself like an athlete. I run every day, and I'm like, that's bullshit. I've done some of them drunk. I mean, it's not true. I mean, good for him.
Hey everybody, Trey Wingo here. Welcome into another episode of Half Forgotten History. You know the drill. We have a nice tall glass of Maker's Mark and tell great stories with an unusual guest this time. He's not an athlete in any way, shape, or form, but he enjoys athletic endeavors, and you enjoy listening to him because he makes you laugh a lot. We're delighted to take a different turn today with stand-up comic Sam Morril. Sam, first of all, I need to know, are those pajamas or a smoking jacket? Because if it's a smoking jacket, it's a strong flex.
Yeah, it's a flex. It's also silk. I don't go anywhere anymore. If I'm going to stay at home all day, I'm going to do it in style, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was sort of weird how we connected. Like, I followed you on Instagram and you followed me back. We started DMing a little bit. And then we just sort of got into this whole thing. And it's turned out we talk now all the time. And you give me much street cred with my kids. So I want you to know that. I appreciate it.
You give me much street cred with my friends, man. I mean, you were like such a big part of my childhood. I hate to make you feel old here, but I mean, it's like it's like if Cinnamon Toast Crunch sent me a DM and followed me, I'd be like, this is huge for me. So,
well, that makes sense because there would be a short burst of euphoria followed by utter depression. So I guess a sugar high is the perfect example of what I would be. But I've really been following you through this pandemic that we're rolling through. How hard is it to be a comedian right now in a COVID era?
It's rough, man. I used to have such a high bar for where I performed. I used to tell my agent, like, high security, low ceiling, so we pocket the laughs. I want nutritional options on the menu. And I'm literally on the phone with my agent now, like, yeah, I'll do a parking lot. You know, like, it's insane. And I'm happy to do a parking lot. I'm happy to do roofs. I'm happy to do any park shows. It's so strange.
You filmed a special on your own on YouTube. It got over 1 million hits. How much of this now is sort of helping you deal with this? Because there is no normal, I can't go to this club in Boca or Naples or wherever. Not that you'd ever go back to Naples. There's a whole bit with that you need to find out if you follow Sam Morril on Naples. But like, how difficult is it to sort of find consistency at this point, knowing that you sort of have to do the parking lots and the roofs and everything like that?
Well, it's tough because I put out that special to help out on the road, to boost ticket sales, you know, because you kind of are taking a bribe at this point if you're not on, like, if you want to be with my first two are on TV with Comedy Central and no one watches cable. So you're kind of like, oh, I'll get the money, but I don't get the fans. And you want to get people to come out to see you. So I did it this way. I'm like, well, now they'll all come out to see me. And then a pandemic hit and that did not help. So I'm just being patient right now, you know?
How hard is that for a guy who, like, most comedians, it's in your blood. Like, it's not a choice. You have to do it. And if you don't do it, bad things are going to happen. So how hard is it to be patient for a career who most of these guys don't know the word patient?
It's so hard, man. Everything takes longer than you think it's going to take. Like, I'm working on a show right now with this other comedian, and they'll be like, we need changes to the show. And we're like, in one day we get the changes. And then they're like, all right, we'll set a phone call in 2 weeks. And I'm like, 2 weeks? You know what I mean? Like, we just did this in one day. So it drives you crazy. And I mean, I see athletes go down with injuries. That's the only thing I could think. I was like, must be what it feels like for an athlete when you're like, I want to be out there so badly, except they figured out a way to do basketball with rapid tests. We can't do that at like every dingy strip mall comedy club in the country, you know?
Yeah. You don't have a drive-through COVID testing place in most of the places you go to.
Dude, I literally got a COVID test, City MD, a couple blocks from me. It took 13 days to get a result. I'm like, how is that helping me? It's literally like getting a pregnancy test in 9 months. You're like, that's helpful.
I was about to say 13 days, you would have passed quarantine already. So what was the point?
Yeah, no point. We haven't figured it out in this country.
Okay, so self-loathing is part of being a comedian. So I have to ask, how did you Like people, I have these two theories, right? People that are shredded and ripped, they really hate themselves because that's the only reason you would put in that much time. You really can't stand who you are. And then self-loathing is a big part of being a comedian. So how did you find your way into this business?
Well, as someone who's shredded and ripped and a comedian, no, I just love jokes. Honestly, I don't have this story that like I'm tortured and I'm damaged. And I really just love comedy and I love jokes. And I listened to Chris Rock when I was a kid. And I remember the first time I listened to it, like the way he would bait people with these, polarizing premises and then get everybody on his side, I thought was so brilliant. I remember I was listening to one of his CDs. I was probably 12 years old. I probably didn't even get that many of them. But my mom sees me laughing. She grabs the CD player, puts the headphones on, and I see this look of horror on her face. And followed by like 20 seconds of horror, and then she just starts laughing her ass off. And I was like, oh my God, that's kind of beautiful that something can do that my mom could be like, oh my God, and then love it. And to me, that was comedy, is that you can win over people with an unpopular premise. And I love that.
So when you decided to do this, like, how do you say, okay, I'm going to try and tell jokes for a living? And how do you sell your mom on it, for example? Because I'm sure she was like, can't you be a doctor? Isn't that possible?
Yeah, my older siblings are lawyers. So
no pressure.
My mom is an artist, and my mom, I think she really liked that I had that creative part of my brain working, but she also was like, comedy clubs she always would say to me on the road, like, are you sure you want this life? And I'm like, well, I'm already here. It's been like over a decade. Like, what am I going to do now? So that's what my family always does. You see them at like any, family gathering. They're like, so you're still doing comedy? I'm like, it's been 15 years. At what point do you accept my lifestyle? So yeah, my mom was upset that, I think she thought it was an excuse for me to drink too much when I started doing it, which it might've been. I think I got into comedy like, well, I get 3 drinks and I'm 18. So that was part of it. But then you start to be around these comics who you respect, and you start to see, like, I remember seeing like Patton Oswalt and Dave Attell in the clubs and being like, oh my God, I want to get better at this. So maybe I was dragged in, as a combination of loving jokes, but also some impure motives. But over time, I was like, oh, I want to be great at this.
So who's the best comedian that you've ever worked with? And you've said, dude, that guy is it.
I think Dave Attell is the funniest human being I've ever met in my life. Like I've never met a human funnier than Dave. He has a way of burning me that is so fun. Like there's like a tenderness to how he beats you up with jokes. There's like, I remember I had a breakup once with a comedian years ago, and I was on stage talking about the Cellar. And as I get off stage, Dave said, is that true? You had a breakup? And I said, yeah. And he goes, you okay? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, with you two broken up, who are you going to take to the South by Southwest Square dance? Immediately just hits me. And like, he always, like, I remember on my birthday once, I was smoking a cigar outside the Cellar. He just grabs me on the shoulder and goes, hey, Sam, you had a good set, but it wasn't that good. He always just so Attell makes me laugh the hardest. He just has his word economy. He's got this unique rhythm. Attell, probably still my favorite joke of all time is off his album Skanks for the Memories, where he goes, you remember when you're young and you think your dad is Superman, and then you grow up and you realize he's just a drunk who wears a cape? That's a brilliant joke. I love one-liners that say a lot in one line, where you're like, wow, I actually have to like take a second for that joke.
Yeah. Well, how do you go through the process? Because I mean, like, I'm assuming you're observing things all the time and you think that might be funny. That might be funny. Take me through the process of how you decide what like a tight 5-minute set is,
Well, that's weird, because tight 5-minute sets you think of in terms of late night sets, which now almost feel out of place in time. Like back in the 80s, Carson Changed Your Life. I've done 9 late night sets. I don't think it made a dent in they don't do anything anymore. They get views online. They're fun to do. You get cool stories. You share, if you're on with a cool actor, that's a fun story. But you're working on these late night sets. I guess you want it to have, the hardest part is the opener and the closer, because the middle, you can kind of do anything. And if the jokes are strong enough, everyone thinks a joke has to segue into another joke. If the joke's strong enough, it'll kill and you could just move on to another joke. So it's really about wrapping a bow on it. And my early late night sets are usually better than the ones I've done recently because you're just so hungry. Like my first one was fine. My second one, I had a chip on my shoulder because I thought I should have been getting more attention from the industry. And I was like angry. I put a lot of work into it. I'm wearing like a red flannel. It's on Conan. That's probably my best late night set because every joke was like a powerhouse joke. And then, over time, you just kind of like I remember hearing Seinfeld on a podcast saying, I treat myself like an athlete. I run every day. And I'm like, that's bullshit. I've done some of them drunk. I mean, it's not true. I mean, good for him. I love Seinfeld, but I don't believe in that. I think just treat it like it's nothing was what I think it is. You go on and be like, this is a regular set. This is not important to me. Be loose. Sometimes if the first joke doesn't get what I want, which it rarely does, I have to fight myself not to be angry at the crowd on TV because you don't want to. I don't like late night sets because you have one take. You have to just nail it in one take, and then that's out into the world forever. It's online. So I like now I can control my own destiny.
All right, so that's interesting because I've always wondered if you come up with a gig or a joke or a line and you think it's money and you think it's hilarious and you get no reaction. Or you don't get the reaction that you thought you would get from the audience. Is that like the worst part of it? Like, I thought this was perfect. I timed it right. It was great. And you guys gave me nothing.
I was so upset. I had a joke, first late night that I ever did on Conan. I still remember I was so upset at the reaction it got. I picked a joke on purpose. I put a lot of thought into it. Well, I'll open self-deprecating. I'll open on a joke that has a lot of punchlines. So if the first punchline doesn't hit by the end of the joke, it'll be killing. It didn't. You can even find it. I think the joke was, I was trying to go home with this girl and she said, I'd invite you over, but my place is messy. And I said, yeah, that's not really a deterrent at 3 a.m. Like a guy, like I'm going to walk into your apartment and be like, absolutely not. This is unacceptable. And then the turn was, yeah, if by the way, if you're willing to have sex with me, I'm going to assume your whole life is in shambles, So I thought that had a lot of punchlines. So I thought by the end, and in the set, I was like, none of them hit that hard. I was pretty upset. And you kind of have to fake it. And I don't like that either. I'm like, why am I faking it? I never fake it in the club. If a joke doesn't hit in the club, I'm going to be like, what's wrong with you guys? Or I'm going to adapt, or I'm going to riff on the room. So I don't like they almost feel like, they're neutering you on some of these sets. Another example of that is, one of my good friends, Nick Griffin, who did Letterman probably 12 times, amazing joke writer, had a joke that I loved where, he's an older guy now and he said, young women are filled with sugar and spice and everything nice. And I'm filled with anger and semen and shame. And I love that joke. And on Letterman, they made him say anger and Prozac and shame. And I'm like, you just killed the rhythm of the joke. Yeah. I hate that. Either help the comic or don't. But once they start doing that Conan never does that, but certain late night sets are like, this word is a problem. And I'm like, I'm not saying fuck. Semen is the clinical term, isn't it?
Right.
I don't know. So I always get annoyed when they start neutering. And at this point, I'm kind of like, no one watches anyway, I don't think.
Well, one of the things that you put a lot of the stuff on your Instagram, you could follow them at Sam Morril, is that you put up a lot of people that are chirping back at you, that are trying to interrupt the routine. Yeah. How much pride do comedians take in just shutting those people down?
I don't think it's comedians as much as I think audiences like it, because when you're kind of killing a heckler, it's almost like they're living vicariously through you. And you're like, that's the asshole at work that I don't get to tell off. So I think they feel like, oh, I'm in the same way that we watch John Wick and we're like, hell yeah, he just fucking shot all those assholes. So I think that's like your moment, but I don't really care as much. To be honest, I care much more about material, but I can't just be burning material constantly on social media. I'm trying to put out specials. So I'll burn those once the specials are out. But yeah, as I'm building a special, that's the only kind of current stuff I can burn.
Yeah. Well, I love it because it's like killing flies with a howitzer. Some of them do it. You play along just long enough, and then it's just bam, and they got nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's always weird to me. It's usually a drunk. It's usually because I try not to be a dick about it. Some people just go out there trying to bury them, and like I remember I was at a show once, and this older guy was like, "I don't want to sit up front because they're going to make fun of me." And the manager said, "Oh, they don't make fun of you." And literally out of the gate, the host was like, "Look at this old motherfucker," and I was like, that's
Oh, no.
that guy didn't do anything. He's just old. So
Yeah.
if they interrupt the show or they're assholes. Also, if they say something, if I'm bored with my material, I don't mind riffing and having fun with the crowd. But if I'm working on stuff and they just keep yelling out, I mean, you kind of have no choice but to address it.
Up to this point, and again, I hope that you do this for another 30 years. What's the moment that you're most proud of?
Geez, honestly, just I think the scariest and but also most meaningful moment was probably just getting past the Comedy Cellar in New York, because that club is my favorite club, and so that's probably the most meaningful thing in my career, is that I get to just go up at the Comedy Cellar.
Well,
It's just such a legendary club, and it's
Yeah.
where all the best comics work out, and it made me. I found an old DVD of me in like 2011 or 12 at the Cellar, and I was like, oh, I was such a dipshit. It's funny to watch yourself. I was like, man, I thought I was an adult. I thought I was like this cool comic, and I watched myself. I'm like, oh, I can just see the fake confidence dripping off you. I was cringing for myself. So I'm grateful they let me work there back then.
Yeah, well, look, I'm the same way. Like I remember taking some of my first demo tapes I've sent out. I'm like, how did you hire me? I'm the worst thing that you'd ever put in your VHS at this time. So being, as I said, being a comedian is tough enough. Why are you doubling down on being a Knicks fan?
Well, it's just in me, man. My brother tried to leave for Brooklyn when when they moved to Brooklyn. He was like, I live in Brooklyn. I'm going to be a Brooklyn fan. And we went to the Knicks Nets game at the Barclays, and he showed up in a Ewing jersey. And I was like, yeah, I knew it wouldn't. He's like, yeah, I couldn't do it. And I was like, yeah, so you can't leave. It's like a part of you. I think I grew up spoiled with what I know you call a tease of a team, but I mean, I loved those players so much. I loved Starks and Oakley and Ewing and Mace. And
Knicks of the 90s.
Harper. I mean, I just read this book by Peter Nepper called The 90s Knicks, and it's incredible.
They were, though, the ultimate tease, right? I mean, they had Riley. They had this. First of all, they looked like a team that was built of nothing but linebackers. You had Xavier McDaniel, Anthony Mason. These guys, I mean, you want to go in a backyard brawl. Those are the guys you would want.
Yeah.
And they literally accomplished everything except that one thing.
Yeah.
Except that one thing.
Well, think about how many players are going to miss out in this era winning a championship because of LeBron, unless they join up. Ewing never joined a super team. There was talk that Ewing could have joined the Run TMC Warriors, and he didn't do it. He stuck around. I know Ewing had a contentious relationship with the fans in New York, but I loved Ewing. Starks was my favorite player growing up. I think every kid loves Starks. He was my guy, but I loved them all. Oakley was the tough guy. He was the glue. Mason was like kind of like a Draymond Green before Draymond Green, a skilled kind of a point forward. Couldn't really shoot the three or anything, but like they just were just such a cool. They were like the Pistons. They just didn't have that second scorer who was, I guess the Pistons, Dumars was a more consistent second scorer than Starks was. As much as I love Starks, he was a little inconsistent.
So, I mean, just to show you how like real that frustration of the 90s Knicks fans is, and everybody talks about it. I was watching a documentary on Netflix the other day called Cue Ball, which is about the San Quentin Prison Basketball League. And they play a Golden State Warriors team of coaches and G League guys. And if they win the game, the Warriors bring the Larry O'Brien trophy, and the players get to hold the trophy. And one of the prisoners, I thought of you immediately because we just had this conversation about how difficult it was to be a Knicks fan in the 90s where they did everything but win and they were so much fun. The guy said, you realize I'm holding the trophy. And he went through 4 or 5 people like, this guy did it. Patrick Ewing never got his hands on the trophy. And I'm like, that's what it is. Yeah. I mean, everyone uses that Knicks team as like, they couldn't get it done. That has to be so frustrating.
Well, there's other teams that were like just built, people thought they'd get a ring, like the Phoenix Suns,
right. Barkley.
Barkley, yeah. Well, but also the one with Nash, Amari, Marion. I mean,
Sure.
that team had weapons, man. So yeah, of course, Barkley with the Suns. The Utah Jazz is used as an example. I mean, Malone and Stockton, they had two guys. Ewing never had another offensive weapon like Stockton. They needed a two guard at like the Mitch Richmond level. They needed someone to just get buckets when Ewing dished it out. And Starks, he'd give you 19 a game, which probably like 23 now these days. But he was inconsistent. He was also a fiery competitor, man. I love Starks. He was up to guarding. He's 6'3" guarding Jordan, and like, look, it's Jordan, but he went hard.
Yeah, he did. No, listen, you got whatever he had. There's no question, and every Knicks fan will say, "Why couldn't it be there in Game 7?" But that's a separate issue entirely.
That was my intro to basketball. I was 7 for that game. I was 7 for Game 7. Dude, Akeem is just better than Ewing. Like, there's just not Akeem's. I think Akeem's the best big man I've ever seen, because Shaq is the most dominant, but I think Akeem would toy with people now. Just his moves. Like, you're telling me Embiid or Rudy Gobert could stop Akeem Olajuwon? I don't think anyone in the league could stop him now.
Outside of the skyhook, the Dream Shake might have been the most unstoppable shot for a big man of all time. Okay, so that was the 90s Knicks when it was fun.
Yeah.
But, dude, it's been misery ever since. And we were just talking, you've been at the game for all the bad things.
I was there for the Ewing finger roll against Indiana. I was there for...
How'd that thing go in?
Oh, dude, I was, I think, 11, and my dad had to throw me over his shoulder screaming. I was like, it's the hardest I've cried. I was like, what the fuck? It's a weird combo, a New York kid crying and also going, fuck! So there's that. There was Porzingis tearing his ACL. That was brutal. I was at the Oakley getting thrown out game, which was brutal. It's been a bad 20 years when like the most joyous moment was 2 weeks during the regular season with Jeremy Lin. It's like
it's insanity. All right, so as a long suffering tortured Knicks fan, what does the name James Dolan mean to you?
I'll say this. He gets a lot of shit, and obviously I think we need a new owner, as every Knicks fan does, but he's given the wrong guys the keys. He's given Phil Jackson, everyone was like, he gave him the keys. Jackson made horrible moves, He
wasn't even a full-time guy. Like he commuted from Montana.
I know. So that was tough. I just feel like, there's like a darkness in that building, and that's tough. I feel like we need like a Mark Cuban type. We need someone who's just really fun and really, I don't know. It seems like he kind of stays away from the Rangers, but is much more involved with the Knicks. And I think we need that, but we'll see what Leon Rose does. I mean, I'm hopeful that Leon Rose turns it around.
Worldwide West?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. They seem like, I've heard nothing bad about those guys. I think, no disrespect to Steve Mills, I don't think there's a reason he hasn't been scooped up by another franchise. He made, when they signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to that $80 million deal, whatever they paid him, I remember looking at my phone, and you would have thought one of my close friends got stabbed or something. Like, that was the reaction. I was just like, why? Why? That's what they do, is they don't have this good culture right now. So in order to get a star, you have to overpay them. And then that cripples the franchise. And if you get certain guys who want to come here, want to come for the wrong reasons, they want to be a part of this big media market, you need winning guys. Like, I felt it for a minute when we brought in Chauncey Billups for like half a season, when we brought in Tyson Chandler. Those are winning culture guys. You need guys like that to want to come here.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Knicks always seem to clear the cap space for that big free agent, and they end up in Brooklyn. I mean, that's sort of the way it goes. Kyrie's not going to be the third banana. It's going to get weird. So I like that. But I don't like – Harden's a once-in-a-lifetime offensive weapon. So is Durant. But he's not giving up the ball. I mean, you know that, so.
Yeah, it would hurt that they would land that kind of star power and that they'd want to be there. So – the Garden is so important. I mean, you talk about that 90s Knicks team. You didn't mention Houston, Sprewell, LJ. Like, I loved those guys. Camby. Like, we had some great teams in my lifetime. It just hasn't been any time recent.
Okay, so here's the hardest question, because you are clearly a huge Knicks fan.
Yeah.
And, I mean, to the core. For anybody that can still claim a Knicks fan, you have my ultimate respect, because it's just like beating yourself over the head with a club.
It's just me
for
and
82 games.
Me and Jerry Ferrara. That's it.
That's it. So, pinnacle moment for you. You get a Netflix special that shatters all returns, and it's off the charts, and it launches you to a stratosphere that you never thought you would be in as a comedian, or the Knicks win an NBA title. What are you choosing?
It's not really just about a title. It's about, see, that's the thing, is that everyone thinks it's about winning. It's about, I'm okay with losing the right way. We're not losing.
It's not being a laughing stock, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
The 90s Knicks didn't win, and they were my favorite team in any, like, I'm a Yankees fan, and the 90s Knicks are my favorite team of all time. And the Yankees and the Giants are also my teams. They've won. The Knicks in the 90s are my favorite, because it's not just about winning. It's about losing gracefully and losing as a unit, and believing and liking the team. I just kind of didn't like how they played. It's just a lot of bad shots. Carmelo's an incredible player. I love Carmelo. I don't like 1-on-5 basketball. I like 90s Knicks. They threw the ball around. They played like those 70s Knicks. I love the way the Spurs play. I love the way like the Pistons with Billups, Rip, Tayshaun, Sheed, and Big Ben played. I love team ball. I love the way the Warriors play. I'm so sad for Klay Thompson's. I like teams that are playing as a unit, and I miss that.
All right. So again, which one are you taking? The title, or you are an international superstar?
I sound like such a douche if I bet on myself here. I think
this is a douche-friendly zone, just so you know.
I mean, I'm wearing a smoker's jacket. I think I take the title, because I can control my work that I put out there, but I can't control what the Knicks are doing. And the Knicks being good. I think the Knicks being a good culture and a good environment over the title even. I just want it to be good again.
Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is why the word fan is short of the word fanatic right there. You have summed it up better than I possibly could. Yeah. Sam, always good to talk to you, my friend.
Cheers,
Continued
man.
success.
You too, man.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
All right.